Okay, quick welcome. This is an original Tales Fair story, and the way it played out caught me off guard.
I came home after a double shift at the hospital, and my 7-year-old daughter was missing. The exhaustion wasn't just a feeling. It was a physical weight, a heavy leaden blanket that had settled over my shoulders somewhere around the 14th hour of the shift and hadn't lifted since. My feet were throbbing in a rhythm that matched the dull ache behind my eyes, a persistent reminder of the miles I'd walked across sterile linoleum floors, tending to bodies that were failing, healing, or simply waiting. The drive home had been a blur of autopilot turns and red lights that smeared into long streaks of crimson against the gray morning sky, my mind suspended in that strange, floaty space between hyper-alertness and total collapse. I had been fantasizing about the silence of the house, the specific, a sacred silence that comes when the world is at work, and you are finally allowed to stop. I had imagined the soft click of the front door latch, the way the sunlight would be pooling on the hallway rug, and the eventual sweet weight of my daughter Kora climbing into bed beside me for a nap after school. But the moment I stepped onto the porch, the fantasy shattered. It wasn't the silence I found. At 11:03 a.m., I stood on the front step in my work shoes, keys still in my hand, and listened. The air didn't hold the stillness of an empty house. It vibrated. It hummed with a frequency that was entirely wrong, a chaotic, busy energy that prickled against my skin. It wasn't the sound of Kora watching cartoons, the low murmur of the TV, or the rhythmic thud of her small feet running down the hall. It was voices. Adult voices. And laughter that sounded sharp and jagged, piercing through the wood of the door. It was the kind of bright, performative energy that usually only filled this house when my mother was hosting someone she wanted to impress, or when my sister Allison was about to ask for money. My body was begging for sleep, screaming for it really, every muscle fiber tight with the memory of lifting patients and adjusting beds. My head was still full of fluorescent lights, the phantom beeping of heart monitors, and the metallic smell of blood and antiseptic. I'd been on my feet so long, my bones felt like they'd been rented out to someone who had run a marathon in them. But I'd been looking forward to this day anyway. 2 hours of sleep, maybe 3 if I got lucky, then the whole afternoon with Kora. We were going to make cookies, like the kind that come in a tube because I was too tired for scratch, and watch her favorite movie for the 100th time. Bedtime together, reading until her eyelids fluttered shut, then I'd crash properly. That was the plan. The plan was a lifeline. I stepped inside, and my instincts, honed by years of assessing critical situations in seconds, immediately screamed that something was wrong. The house smelled intensely of coffee and maple syrup, a domestic perfume that masked something rotter underneath. I could hear my mom's bright voice, the one she uses when she's trying to sell you on something, pitching an idea that benefits only her. And then, through the archway, I saw my sister Allison in the hallway. She was in her socks, sliding across the floor, hauling flattened cardboard boxes. In a large box for a professional ring light was propped against the wall, already torn open, the styrofoam packing peanuts spilling out like white confetti. She looked up as the door clicked shut behind me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a muscle memory smile, one that showed no teeth and no warmth. "Oh, you're home," she said. The tone was casual, dismissive, as if I were a delivery driver interrupting an important meeting. I didn't smile back. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask why there were boxes in the hallway or why the house felt like a staging ground for a revolution. I just walked past her. The fatigue fell away, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I walked straight to Kora's room because I'm a mother, not a tourist in my own life. I pushed the door open and stopped so fast my shoulder hit the frame, and the breath left my lungs in a rush. The room looked like it had been hit by a polite, beige tornado. Kora's bed, her sanctuary, was stripped down to the bare striped mattress. Her blanket, the soft pink fleece, one she refuses to sleep without, the one she rubs between her thumb and forefinger when she's anxious, was folded into a tight square and shoved into a laundry basket like it was nothing more than dirty linen. Her stuffed bunny, the one with the worn ear, was sitting upright on the dresser, turned toward the wall as if it had been put in timeout. The rug was rolled halfway up, exposing the dust bunnies underneath. And the walls were bare in patches where her drawings, her little crooked rainbows, and stick figure family portraits used to be taped with pride. There was blue painter's tape stuck to the baseboards, a yellow measuring tape stretched across the floor like a crime scene marker, and on the desk sat a stack of printed photos, inspiration boards, inspo, all beige and white and aggressively adult, filled with minimalist furniture and macrame wall hangings. This wasn't cleaning. This wasn't organizing. This was repurposing. This was erasure. This was a statement that said, loud and clear, "Your child doesn't live here anymore, so her room is available." My throat tightened, a physical constriction that made swallowing impossible. I turned in a slow circle, my eyes darting to the corners, under the desk, behind the door, hoping against logic that she was hiding, that this was a game. "Kora," I called, softly at first. The silence that answered me was heavy and absolute. I stepped farther into the room, my boots leaving prints on the dust. Yes, the closet door was open. Her backpack was gone. Her favorite sneakers were missing from the rack. My hands went cold, the blood draining from my extremities to pool in my gut. I turned back into the hallway, moving with a purpose that felt dangerous. Allison was leaning against the wall, checking her reflection in the screen of her phone. "Where is she?" I asked. The words came out low, vibrating in the narrow space. Allison blinked at me, feigning confusion, blinking slowly, like a cat. "Where's who?" she asked. My voice stayed even, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Where is my daughter?" Before Allison could answer, my mom's voice floated from the kitchen, syrupy and light. "Oh, honey," she called, the tone implying that I was being dramatic, that I was the problem. Come in here." I didn't move toward the kitchen. I stood my ground. "Where is Kora?" I repeated, louder this time. Footsteps shuffled. Then my mom appeared at the end of the hallway, wiping her hands on a floral dish towel like she was in a commercial for detergent. My dad stood behind her, looming, his face set in a mask of stubborn righteousness. Allison shifted beside me, suddenly finding a hangnail very interesting. I repeated myself for the third time, separating each word. "Where is Kora?" My mom smiled, tight and bright, the skin around her eyes crinkling in a way that looked painful. "We voted," she said. I stared at her. The words didn't make sense. They were English words, but arranged in a sentence that had no place in reality. "We what?" She lifted her chin, a gesture of defiance I knew well from my childhood. "We voted. You don't get a say." I felt the world go quiet, like someone had turned down the volume on everything except the rushing of blood in my ears. The hallway seemed to stretch, the walls closing in. "You voted," I repeated slowly, my brain refusing to accept the data at normal speed. "About what?" My dad crossed his arms over his chest, a defensive barricade. "It's been discussed," he grunted. "It's been decided." I let out a short, breathless laugh that didn't contain a single ounce of humor. It was a sound of shock, of a mind snapping. "You held a vote about my child." My mom's expression hardened, the smile dropping to reveal the annoyance underneath. "You're never here, Hannah. You work all the time. You're always gone." "I work," I said, my voice trembling with the effort to keep it steady, "because bills don't care about feelings. Because this mortgage doesn't pay itself." "Now where is she?" Allison chimed in then, casual as a weather report, bored by the drama. "She's with her dad." The air in my chest vanished. It was as if I'd been punched in the solar plexus. "With Stephen," I said. and the name tasted like ash. It came out flat, dead. My mom nodded vigorously, like she'd just solved a complex math problem and was waiting for a gold star. Where's she supposed to be? My hands started to tingle, the adrenaline flooding my system. My 7-year-old barely knows him, I whispered. He's still her father, my dad said, his voice booming with unearned authority. Biologically, I shot back, and my voice stayed calm in that dangerous, razor-edged way. Calm like the eye of a hurricane. Calm like I was holding a scalpel and trying not to cut. My mom sighed, a long, exaggerated exhalation that signaled I was exhausting her with my unreasonableness. We had to make a decision. You don't have the outside perspective. You're too close to it. You're too emotional. I'm her mother, I said, stepping forward. That's the perspective. That is the only perspective that matters. Allison stepped forward then, pointing down the hallway like a real estate agent showing off features. And besides, we need that room. I stared at her, blinking. The absurdity of it was almost blinding. You need Kora's room. Allison didn't even flinch. She smoothed her hair, checking for flyaways. I work from home now. I'm building a brand. I need an office, a studio. You can't film content with a child running around, making noise, messing up the aesthetic. I looked from her to my mom, waiting for the punchline. Yes, you're turning her room into a studio. My mom nodded, her face serious. We can't have a child here in the house all the time. It's disturbing. It disrupts the flow. Disturbing? I echoed. My daughter existing is disturbing? My dad added, grumbling. And you can't take care of her properly. You're always at work. You're absent. So why are you acting shocked? This is for the best. I felt something cold and clear settle into place inside me. It wasn't anger yet. It was something sharper, more crystalline. It was the realization that the people standing in front of me were strangers. I took a slow breath, inhaling the scent of their coffee and their betrayal. Then I turned away and walked to the bathroom. Not because I was running, but because if I stayed in that hallway for 1 second longer, and I was going to say something that would set the whole house on fire, and I needed the fire later, when it would matter. I locked the door. The click of the lock was the only sound in the universe. I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was work-worn, pale under the harsh bathroom light. There were dark circles under my eyes. The look of a woman who has spent years trying to be reasonable with unreasonable people. A woman who has poured herself out until she is empty. I put both hands on the cool porcelain of the sink and breathed. In, out, in, out. I watched my pupils dilate and contract. I reminded myself who I was. I was a nurse. I saved lives. I handled trauma. I could handle this. Then I unlocked the door and stepped back into the hallway. They were still talking, their voices murmuring in a self-congratulatory huddle. I'm still justifying, still acting like they were the executive committee in charge of my life. I walked toward them, calm, steady, different. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fusion of rage and purpose. I stopped a few feet away from them. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I stayed calm and said one sentence. I want you out of my house within 30 days. They all stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. The color drained from their faces in unison. They stared at me like they'd never seen me before, like I was an alien creature that had just burst out of their daughter's skin. And in a dry, dark way, it was funny, because they hadn't seen me. Not really. They'd spent my whole life training me to be the version of me that wouldn't scare them, the one who didn't push back, the one who smiled and nodded, in the one who took whatever scraps of affection were handed to her and called it family. But the woman standing in that hallway, she wasn't asking for permission anymore. She was done negotiating. Watching their faces shift, seeing the confusion morph into indignation, pulled me backward through time. Because this didn't start today. It didn't start with the vote. It started when I was a kid. My sister Allison is 2 years younger than me. 2 years is nothing in the grand scheme of the universe, but in our house, it was a chasm. It was a crown. Allison was the favorite. Not in the obvious way where parents say it out loud over dinner. They were smarter than that. They did it the quiet way, the insidious way that lets them deny it later if you ever confront them. Allison got praised for being special. For being spirited. I got praised for being helpful. Allison was creative, a dreamer. I was responsible, the solid ground. If Allison cried, my mom moved, like an emergency alarm went off, rushing to soothe her. If I cried, my dad would glance over his newspaper and say, "You're fine. Stop making a fuss." So I learned how to be fine. I learned how to swallow my tears until they turned into a lump in my throat that never really went away. I learned how to be useful. I learned how to anticipate what they wanted before they said it, handing them the remote, the salt, the answer, just to buy a moment of approval. Because if you're useful, you get tolerated. And even when I was little, I could feel it. The way they wanted me. Not gone exactly, but out of the way. Silent, functioning. Fast forward to adulthood. I became a nurse because nursing makes sense to me. There's a problem, you address it. Someone is hurt, you help. There is a protocol. You don't vote on whether someone deserves care based on how much you like them. Then I met Stephen. He was charming in the way people are charming when they know how to mirror your desires. Funny, easygoing, the kind of person who made you relax your guard because he seemed so harmless. I got pregnant. The charm evaporated. Stephen went quiet. Then he said, flat and clear, "I don't want kids." Like he was picking a side dish at a restaurant and had decided against the coleslaw. I was young enough to think love could fix it. That once he saw the baby, the paternal instinct would kick in. I was old enough to know I wasn't ending my pregnancy just because a man wanted to stay comfortably irresponsible. So, I had Kora. Stephen held her once, briefly, awkwardly, holding her away from his body like she was fragile and unfamiliar, or perhaps contagious. After that, he faded. He became a ghost in his own daughter's life. He didn't show up for the hard parts, the fevers, the teething, the tantrums. He didn't show up for the normal parts either. He'd appear a few times a year, drop by for an hour, say something like, "Hey kiddo," take a photo to post on social media, like proof of life, and disappear again. We never went to court. Not because I didn't believe in paperwork, but because Stephen didn't believe in parenting. And you can't negotiate custody with someone who treats involvement like an optional subscription service he keeps forgetting to cancel. So Kora lived with me. When she was about 5, I had a job that technically worked. And it wasn't glamorous. It was a clinic job, part-time hours, predictable shifts. The kind of schedule that lets a single mom do daycare pickup without sprinting through a parking lot like she's in a crime show. Money was tighter, sure. We ate a lot of pasta, but Kora was safe. I was present. I could breathe. And then I got offered the position nurses actually want. The promotion. Head nurse in a specialized unit. Better pay, real career traction. The kind of step up you don't get twice. The catch was the schedule. Brutal hours, rotating shifts, sometimes doubles. The kind of job that looks great on a resume and destroys your life in practice if you don't have a village to support you. My first instinct was to say no. I mentioned it casually to my parents over Sunday dinner, more like I was thinking out loud than asking for anything. And that's when they did a sudden emotional U-turn, so fast it should have come with screeching tires and warning lights. Because before that, they weren't warm with Kora. They weren't openly cruel. They didn't hit her or yell at her. But they were distant. They treated her like a guest child who might spill juice on the white sofa. They also didn't care about my career. Not really. So, when my mom suddenly said, "You have to take it," I actually thought I'd misheard. "You can move in here," she said. breathless with enthusiasm, clutching my hand. We'll help. We're retired. We have all the time in the world. We can do childcare. You can't pass this up. This is your future. My dad nodded in agreement. Allison, still living at home as an adult, said, "It's a one-time opportunity. You'd be stupid not to." It was suspicious. And the sudden warmth, the eagerness. And then a week later, the reason finally surfaced. They were about to lose the house. My childhood home, the place they treated like a throne, the symbol of their status. They were drowning in debt, about $68,000 in unsecured credit card debt, spending money they didn't have on things they didn't need to impress people they didn't like. And they were roughly $19,400 behind on the mortgage and taxes. Their credit was wrecked. They couldn't refinance. They couldn't borrow. They couldn't fix it. And my stable, better-paying job? That was their lifeline. That was their bailout. They sat me down like they were pitching a business plan. "We need you to sign some things," my mom said, sliding papers across the table. "What things?" I asked, already feeling my skin prickle with warning. "A loan?" my dad said. Avoiding eye contact. "In your name." My stomach dropped. "No," I said instantly. "It's temporary," my mom said quickly, her voice rising in panic. "We'll pay you back. We just need to bridge the gap." Allison smiled like she was sharing a genius trick. "Your credit is good. Ours is complicated." And then came the part they tried to toss out like a minor detail, a footnote. "The house would need to be transferred into your name," my mom said too fast. "Just for the paperwork. It's just a formality. So the bank sees the income matches the deed. A formality. They wanted me to take on the liability, carry the debt, risk my future, and they still expected to keep the power. I didn't like it. I didn't trust it. But I also couldn't watch them lose the house. I couldn't watch them be homeless. And this is the part that still makes me angry at myself. I wanted to believe they meant the rest of it. The childcare, the "we love having Kora here," the sudden enthusiasm for being a family. I wanted to buy the love I hadn't gotten for free. So I said yes. I put in about $24,000 of my hard-earned savings up front to clear the immediate arrears. I took on a monthly house payment of about $2,350 in my name. I signed what they put in front of me. The house was transferred into my name, and they called it a formality. At first, the deal held. They did childcare. I worked. Kora adjusted. Then the paperwork cleared. The house was safe. The crisis was over. And it was like the deal vanished into thin air. Suddenly, I was dumping my child on them. Suddenly, my job was a bad choice that took me away from home. Suddenly, and I was never here. Like they hadn't insisted I take the schedule. Allison started complaining the most about noise, about space, about needing a home office and a studio for her content, and Kora became the problem. Too loud, too present, too inconvenient. My parents backed Allison the way they always had, protecting the golden child from the inconvenience of reality. Then the comments started. "Well, there is a dad. Why isn't she with him more? You can't rely on us forever." I didn't take it seriously because Stephen wasn't a father in any way that mattered, and because I never believed my parents would actually do what they were hinting at. I thought it was control, pressure, threats, until I came home at 11:03 a.m. after a double shift, and Kora's room was being dismantled like she'd never existed there. And my mom said, "We voted." Back in the hallway, the silence was still ringing. "What do you mean?" my mom snapped, breaking the spell. "What are you talking about?" my dad added, louder, like volume could rewrite reality. I didn't answer. I didn't argue. I walked past them to my room, because there's a certain kind of power in not explaining yourself to people who have never explained themselves to you. They followed me, their voices like gnats buzzing at my ears. "That's not your house," my mom said from the doorway. "That's ours. We built this life." "Don't speak to your parents like that," my dad barked. "We made the difficult decision for you," my mom added, trying to regain the moral high ground. "You should have made it years ago." Allison's voice cut in, sharp with panic. "It's the right thing to do. I need the space." I kept moving. I took off my work shoes. I grabbed my bag, my phone, my keys. Then I pulled open the bottom drawer of my dresser and took out the folder I'd been avoiding for years. The blue folder. The one with the paperwork. The one that proved what was just a formality was actually the only leverage I had. I slid it into my bag without looking at it too long, because if I did, I'd remember every moment I'd swallowed my doubts to save them. I walked back out. They were waiting, blocking the hallway, watching me like I was suddenly dangerous. "I will send you legal papers shortly," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I want you out of this house." My mom froze in a way that wasn't performative this time. Real fear flickered in her eyes. My dad snapped, "You can't do that. You wouldn't dare." Allison turned to him, voice pitching up into a whine. Can she do that? What does she mean?" I didn't answer. I walked out the front door. No yelling, no scene, no dramatic monologue. Just a clean exit. And behind me I heard the scramble, the sudden shift from smug certainty to panicked calculation. In the car, my hands were steady on the wheel, but my knees were shaking. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I called Stephen. No answer. Voicemail. Of course. I drove anyway because sitting still would have turned into spiraling, and spiraling doesn't get your kid back. Why didn't he call me? Why wasn't he answering? Why did my parents feel comfortable delivering my child like an unwanted package? I called again. Nothing. So I did the next thing. I called his mother. Susan picked up on the first ring. Her voice was cold, icy. Like she'd been waiting for this moment for years. "Hannah," she said. "No pleasantries. Do you know where Kora is?" I asked, and I heard the crack in my own voice, the vulnerability leaking through. "My parents said she's with Stephen, but he isn't answering. Is she okay?" "She will stay with us," Susan said, flat and final. "And you are not getting her back." I blinked, nearly swerving into the next lane. "What?" "She's fine," Susan said. "But you are not getting her back. She's better off here." Then she hung up. No warning, no explanation, just a click like she'd closed a file on my life. I stared at my phone for half a second, like it might change its mind. It didn't. I turned the car around so fast my tires chirped against the asphalt. I drove to Susan and David's house with my jaw clenched hard enough to crack a tooth. When I got there, I didn't park politely. I pulled into the driveway at an angle. I marched up the walk and knocked like I was trying to knock the lie out of the wood. Susan opened the door a few inches, leaving the chain on. Not welcoming inches, the kind that say, "I can shut this the second you give me a reason." I didn't bother with hello. "Where's Kora?" Susan's eyes moved over me. She took in the scrubs, the messy hair, the dark circles, the look of a woman running on fumes and fury. She didn't soften. If anything, she looked more certain of her judgment. "She's here," she said. Relief hit fast, washing over me like cold water, making my knees weak. Then she added, flat as a slammed door, "And you're not getting her back." My stomach dropped. "Excuse me." "Your parents brought her," Susan said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Wait, they said you knew. They said you agreed." "I didn't," I said, leaning closer to the crack in the door. "I came home and she was gone. I had no idea." Susan's gaze didn't move. "They said you wanted her with Stephen. They said you were overwhelmed, that you wanted to focus on your career." A short, humorless breath escaped me. "Stephen won't even answer his phone. Does that sound like a plan I made?" That did something. Not kindness, just a flicker, like the name was an old bruise she didn't want to press. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Her husband, David, appeared in the hallway, arms crossed, face unreadable. He didn't step closer. He just watched, like he was measuring the situation and deciding what it was worth. "Is she okay?" I asked, and I hated how careful my voice sounded, how much I had to plead. Susan didn't hesitate. "She's safe." "Let me see her." Susan's hand stayed on the door. I could feel my pulse in my throat, fluttering like a trapped moth. I forced it down. Nurse mode. Controlled. Clear. "I'm not here to debate," I said. "I'm here for my daughter. I have legal custody. You are holding her against my will." Susan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You should have come with her, if you cared so much." "I didn't send her," I said, emphasizing every word. "My parents did, behind my back, while I was working to pay for the roof over their heads." Silence. Not peace. Calculation. David's gaze shifted, subtle, like he was checking if my story held weight, if the cracks in my parents' narrative were visible. Susan's voice stayed cold. "People say anything when they want something." "Then don't take my word for it," I said. I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up, screen facing her. One glance was enough. Missed calls to Stephen stacked like a ladder of desperation. The call to Susan, the timestamp. I called him. No answer. I called you. You hung up. If I sent her, why am I panic calling you? Susan didn't look at the phone for long, but David did. Just a flick, like he couldn't help himself. I kept my voice low. "Ask Kora what she was told." Susan's jaw tightened. David didn't move for a beat. Then he spoke, calm, almost bored, like he was trying not to show his hand. "Was she upset when she arrived?" Susan's eyes flashed at him, a warning, but she answered anyway. "Yes." I nodded once. "Then you already know something's wrong." The house behind them was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl because it means someone small is sitting very still, trying to be invisible. Susan's grip on the door didn't loosen. David's eyes flicked past her shoulder toward the hallway, then back to me. Another beat. Then he shifted just enough to create space. "Come in," he said. Not warm, just letting me through. I stepped inside, and the air in the house felt heavy. And then I saw her. Kora was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of juice in front of her. Her shoulders were hunched up to her ears. Her hands were wrapped around the cup like it was the only solid thing in the world, the anchor keeping her from floating away. She looked small in a way that made something inside me go completely still. "Kora," I breathed. Her eyes lifted to me. She didn't run. She didn't smile. And she just stared, like she was waiting to see if I was real, or if I was another trick. I crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her. "Hi, baby," I said softly. I wrapped my arms around her. She didn't hug me back. She stayed stiff, arms at her sides, like she didn't trust the moment, like she was waiting for the rejection. My chest tightened until it hurt. I pulled back just enough to see her face. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying the way kids usually cry. It was like she'd already cried herself dry and ran out of room for it. Then her voice came out, small and broken and terrifying. "Grandma said you didn't want me." My throat closed. I couldn't breathe for a second. The rage I had felt earlier was nothing compared to this. This was molten. I looked up briefly towards Susan and David, as they were watching from the doorway, guarded and silent, like they were waiting for a verdict. Then I looked back at my daughter. "Honey," I said, and my voice shook, betraying everything. "She lied." Kora's lip trembled. "She said you told them. She said you were tired of me. That I was too much trouble." My eyes burned with unshed tears. "I came home," I said carefully, like my words were the only thing holding her together. "I came home, and you weren't there. I was looking forward to spending the whole day with you. I drove as fast as I could to find you." Kora's eyes searched mine, looking for the truth. "You didn't tell them?" she whispered. "You didn't tell them to bring me here because you don't want me." "Never," I said, and my voice broke on the word. "Not in a million years. And not for 1 second." Her shoulders sagged a little. Then, slowly, her arms lifted and wrapped around my neck. Not tight, not instantly. Cautious, but real. I held her like the world had proven it couldn't be trusted, and I was the only shield she had left. Behind us, I could feel Susan and David watching. Still guarded, still quiet. Then David cleared his throat. "We thought you didn't want her," Susan said stiffly. I didn't look up. I kept my face buried in Kora's hair. "I do," I whispered. David's voice came lower, steadier. "We don't approve of what Stephen is like. We know who our son is." That made me look up. His eyes were serious, not soft, but sincere. "And when we believed a child was being handed over like she was unwanted," he added, "we were willing to take her without hesitation. We weren't going to let her bounce around the system." Susan nodded once, still rigid. "We weren't going to let her suffer." I absorbed that. Not trust, not relief, but information. A crack in the wall placed exactly where it belonged. They weren't the villains of this story. They were just the cleanup crew for the mess my parents and their son had made. I stood, keeping one hand on Kora's shoulder. "I'm taking her," I said. Susan didn't argue. David didn't block the door. They watched us go. Kora held my hand so tightly in the car it hurt, her knuckles white, and I let it hurt because it meant she was there. I drove away, knowing one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I didn't take Kora back to the house. Not after what I'd seen in her room. Not after what my mother had told her. That house was no longer a home. It was a crime scene of emotional betrayal. I drove us straight to a hotel. It was a chain hotel. Beige walls, neutral carpet, abstract art bolted to the wall. The kind of place designed to be emotionally forgettable. Perfect. Kora climbed onto the bed with her shoes still on and stared at the TV without turning it on. I sat beside her and exhaled, the sound loud in the quiet room. "Okay," I said softly. "New plan." Kora looked at me, eyes wary. "Are we safe?" That question hit like a punch to the gut. I reached for her hand. "Yes," I said, "we're safe. Nobody is coming in here without my permission." Then I did what I do when everything is falling apart. I started handling it. I compartmentalized. I called work. "Family emergency," I said to my charge nurse, keeping my voice steady. "I need time off." On indefinite. No one in a hospital asks for a full explanation when your voice sounds like that. They know the sound of crisis. "Take what you need," she said. "We'll cover." I hung up and looked at my daughter, and the mother bear part of me, quiet for too long under exhaustion and people-pleasing, stood up fully. Food first, room service, bath. Clean pajamas I bought from the Target down the street. Warm drink, her favorite show on the tablet. My hand on her back while she tried to fall asleep. I didn't unload my rage on her. I didn't hand her my adult fear to carry. I just kept saying what mattered. "You're with me. I've got you. No one gets to move you around again." She fell asleep, curled against my side like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. When she was breathing evenly, I checked my phone. Missed calls. So many. Mom. Yes, Dad. Allison. Texts, too. Angry, confused, demanding. "Where did you go?" "You're overreacting. Come back and talk about this. We need to discuss the house." I didn't respond. I turned the phone face down. In the morning, I called a law firm and scheduled an emergency meeting. The next day, I sat across from Mr. Brown in an office that smelled like old paper and polished wood. He had the calm face of a man who had seen every variation of family chaos professionally and didn't flinch at it. I slid the folder across his desk, the documents I'd taken when I left. The deed. the mortgage statements, the proof. Mr. Brown flipped through them slowly, his eyes scanning the fine print. Then he looked up. "The house is legally yours," he said. "Maybe the transfer is complete and binding." My lungs loosened like they'd been tight for years. "You can absolutely evict them," he continued, tapping the paper. "Given the circumstances and the fact that there is no lease agreement, we can proceed immediately. I'll send the letters and start the process." I nodded once. "Do it." Mr. Brown's pen moved across paper. "They'll be angry. Evictions of family members are volatile." I let out a dry little laugh. They were angry when they voted my daughter out of her own home. At least this time, their anger comes with a postage stamp. 2 days later, Kora was back at school. Not magically fine, not instantly healed, but back in routine, which is the scaffolding of recovery. And I was back at the hospital, trying to work like my personal life wasn't a smoking crater. And I was in the hallway near the nurse's station, charting on a tablet, when I heard my name. Not a coworker voice. A demanding voice. A voice from the past. I turned, and there they were. My mom and dad, standing in the middle of the hospital unit, waving papers, the eviction documents. My mom's face was red with fury, her hair slightly disheveled. My dad looked like he'd been chewing on anger for 48 hours straight. They marched up to the desk and started raising their voices. Patients looked over. Staff stiffened. Someone in security started paying attention. I stepped forward before it became a full scene. 5 minutes, I said, clipped, cutting off my mother's opening salvo. "That's all you get." My mom hissed, "Oh, now you have limits. Now you have a voice." I led them to a side corridor near an empty consult room. It close enough that staff could see me, far enough that my unit didn't have to watch this reality show. My dad shoved the papers toward me, thrusting them into my chest. "Explain this." My mom's voice climbed, shrill and piercing. "How dare you? How dare you send lawyers after us? After everything we've done for you?" My dad snapped. "You scammed us. You stole our house." I blinked slowly, looking at them. "I stole it." "Yes," my mom spat. "You used a loophole. You planned this. You betrayed your parents to steal our asset." I kept my voice flat. Hospital calm. The kind of calm you use when someone is bleeding out and panic will kill them. "You begged me to do it," I said. "Do not rewrite history." My mom scoffed. "We never begged. We offered you an opportunity." "You did," I said, relentless. "Thank you were about $68,000 in unsecured debt. You were roughly $19,400 behind on the mortgage and taxes. You couldn't refinance. Your credit was ruined. The bank was weeks away from foreclosing." My dad's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "I put in about $24,000 of my own savings up front, remember?" I continued, counting the points on my fingers. "I took on a monthly payment of about $2,350 in my name. I put my credit and my future on the line to save you from homelessness." My mom's eyes flashed. "And you're throwing that in our faces? Money? Is that all we are to you?" "No," I said. "I'm putting it back where it belongs. In the column of things I did for you that you never appreciated." My dad stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. "We're your parents. You owe us respect." I looked at him and felt something settle into place. Clean, final, the last tether snapping. "You stopped being my parents the moment you voted my daughter out," I said. "The moment you packed her bag and lied to her." My mom's voice rose higher. "We made the difficult decision for you. You were drowning." "You made it for yourselves," I said. "For Allison's studio. For your comfort. For control. Because you didn't want to deal with a child." My mom flinched like I'd slapped her. "You dumped my child at Stevens," I said, letting the venom seep into my tone. "You told her I didn't want her. You tried to break her heart to make your lives easier." My dad's eyes flicked away for half a second. Guilt? Or just embarrassment at being caught? Good, I thought. You don't get access to Kora, I said. Not now. Not ever. My mom snarled, ugly and desperate. You can't keep her from us. Grandparents' rights. I can, I said. And I will. Try me. Their voices climbed again. Accusations, panic, rage. I took one step back and nodded to the security guard who was now hovering at the end of the hallway, watching closely. I'm done, I said. You've used your 5 minutes. My mom started to protest, grabbing for my arm. Security stepped in, a wall of uniform and authority. They were escorted out, still shouting, still trying to drag me back into the old role, the obedient daughter, the fixer. But the role was gone, burned to ash. I watched them disappear through the doors, heart pounding, hands shaking, but spine straight. Because power isn't loud. Power is leaving. Power is knowing you don't have to listen anymore. And as I turned back toward my unit, toward the beeping monitors and the patients who actually needed me, one thought landed cleanly. They thought they could vote my daughter out. I decided to vote them out instead. A month later, my mom, my dad, and Allison had moved out. Not stormed out and came back. Moved out. Actually gone. The sheriff had served the final notice, and they realized I wasn't bluffing. I took a new job at a clinic a town over. Part-time, stable hours, no double shifts. The kind of schedule that fits motherhood. The house held too many memories, too many ghosts of arguments in the hallway, so I didn't move back in. Instead, I rented it out for about $2,850 a month. I used the income to live comfortably on part-time work and pay for occasional childcare when I needed it. And life also got easier for a very simple reason. My mom, my dad, and Allison weren't draining my finances anymore. No more loans for Allison's projects. No more covering unexpected bills for my parents. I went completely no contact, no calls, no texts, no just checking in. I blocked their numbers. I blocked their emails. I heard through distant relatives that they were in a cramped 2-bedroom rental now. And Allison was still there too, freeloading, running her influencer hobby from her bedroom, living off their pension like it was a career plan. They were miserable. And for the first time in my life, their misery wasn't my problem to fix. Kora recovered slowly. It wasn't a straight line. There were nightmares. There were days she asked if I was going to leave her. But slowly, she started sleeping through the night again. Started laughing without checking my face first to see if it was okay. Started trusting that home meant me and that I wasn't going anywhere. And the twist I didn't expect? I stayed in contact with Susan and David. They didn't excuse Stephen. In fact, they were disgusted by his silence. They didn't defend him. They showed up for Kora quietly, consistently. They visit every week now. They bring books, not demands. And Kora actually enjoys it. She has grandparents who want her, not for what she can do for them, but just because she exists. So, what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Did I steal from my parents? Or did I just take back what I paid for? Was I right to kick them out and keep the property? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like this.